First, I want to congratulate both Ravi and Paranjoy for writing this book, making the effort to write this book. I think it's an invaluable piece of information uh, which will uh, which will be historically very, very important in the time to come. What strikes you? Actually, I had once written a book on the Bofors deal in 1990 and had the occasion to look at that very carefully. If you compare the Bofors deal with the Rafale deal, there are many things which are very, very striking. See, in the Bofors deal, as Mr. Ram said, there was a money trail, and that's what excited a lot of people. But other than that, there wasn't that much by way of national security being compromised in that deal. Of course, the money trail was about 64 crores. Here we have a deal which, in my view, compromises national security to a very, very large extent. Because what it did was to scrap a deal which was in the making for a long time, almost concluded, where the Air Force had said that we require 126 aircrafts. They still say that because now they have issued another RFR for another more than 100 aircraft. So there was a clause of Make in India, transfer of technology in that earlier deal. And of course, the price was much less. Even the then Defense Minister, Mr. Parikar, the maximum that he could say as a price for those 126 aircraft was 1,30,000 crores. He said that, well, that was scrapped because it would have cost 90,000 crores, which was too much for us. Then he says, okay, it would have cost 110,000. Then he said 130,000, but that was the maximum, which comes to about 1,000 crore per aircraft. Finally, the deal which was struck for 36 aircraft was more than 1,600 crores per aircraft. But leaving aside the price, what you have done is and this happened completely unilaterally. If you read the book, you'll realize that there is a very detailed laid down procedure for the procurement of any defense equipment, especially something as critical as aircraft. That first the Air Force has to say how many aircraft they need, what kind of aircrafts they need, what kind of capabilities they should have, etc. Thereafter, the matter goes to another committee called the Categorization Committee, which then discusses and decides as to whether these can be made in India, whether they have to be procured from abroad, whether there can be some parts made in India, some parts procured from abroad. Then it goes to a body called the Defense Acquisition Council, which has everybody, Defense Minister, Finance Minister, Air Force Chief, etc., etc. And they take a final call as to what kind of aircrafts, how many aircrafts, etc. And then a request for, what's it called? RFR. RFP, request for proposal, is made, and then a tender is issued. All that had been done. 4 companies were invited to make bids. 2 bids were shortlisted. Thereafter, one was this Dassault was found R1. Negotiations with and several people are on record, even as late as March 2015, on the eve of this new deal, to say that the old deal, that the process for acquiring 126 aircraft, out of which 18 would be bought in a ready-to-fly condition and the remaining 108 would be made in the HAL factory with transfer of technology, was almost complete. They all said 95% complete, almost done. And at that stage, without even the defense minister knowing that this deal, which was almost done in the offing for the last 10 years, is about to be scrapped by the Prime Minister unilaterally, The Prime Minister just calls him 1 week before his trip to France and tells him, I'm going to scrap this deal and get into another deal and you'll have to defend it. And thereafter he goes to France and suddenly announces a completely new deal without any process of the Air Force first saying, all right, we are now happy with 36. You should scrap that 126, that we want all 36 ready to fly. We don't want any transfer of technology, etc. And even if the price was negotiated subsequently, you negotiated it from such a weak position because, you see, and this is one other thing that we learned from the manner in which this 36 aircraft deal was struck by Modi alone, is the same way in which he took the decision for demonetization. Nobody was consulted. Not even the Reserve Bank was told in the evening at 5 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock they gave their go-ahead, and at 8 o'clock in the evening Modi announced this decision. Finance Minister didn't know, the Council of Economic Advisors didn't know, nobody was consulted. And unilaterally that decision was announced, which was an unmitigated disaster. None of the objectives of demonetization were achieved, and enormous misery was inflicted on the people. And I say that this decision of Mr. Modi, and thereafter, of course, everybody followed suit, meaning they all went through the motion of ratifying it, the Defense Acquisition Council ratified it, and so on and so forth. But that was after the Prime Minister had publicly announced this decision to scrap the earlier deal and go in for a new deal. So what has that done? Why do I say that decision seriously compromised national security? At the one hand, it led to reducing the aircrafts which were going to come from 126 to 36. Everybody was ad item in the Air Force. Even today they say that we need 100 more aircraft. No dispute among anybody about that. And yet the Prime Minister himself scrapped the earlier deal and went in for only 36. And no transfer of technology, no make in India. And on top of that, he chooses an offset partner. If you read the book, it's absolutely crystal clear that Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, chose the offset partner as Anil Ambani of this Reliance Industries, a failed businessman with debts of over 1 lakh crore, who has publicly declared that I am bankrupt, I don't have any money to pay back, I am totally bankrupt. That gentleman is chosen as the offset partner to take care of 50% of the price of this deal by way of Make in India, who has never ever had anything to do with even making a screw for any defense equipment or of any kind. That gentleman is suddenly picked out of the blue and made the offset partner. Then, as I said, the benchmark price was suddenly changed. The people who objected to the change of the benchmark price in the relevant committees were hastily removed. The people in the price negotiating committee who objected to it were also removed. All kinds of toadies were brought in. The CAG was first time in the history of the CAG. It did an audit where pricing details are removed from the audit of this Rafale deal. And the government knew in advance, before the CAG report was prepared, the government told the Supreme Court in a note in a sealed cover, without any affidavit, that CAG has done the audit has been placed before the PSC, and they have removed the pricing details. Now, how does the government know, before the CAG report is prepared, that pricing details will be knocked out of this CAG report? Never happened in history before. First time it was being done, but the government knew in advance, which also throws very poor light on the CAG, that it is willing to do whatever the government wants it to do. And then the Supreme Court, the CBI. You see, we gave a complaint to the CBI pointing out that, look, there is corruption involved in this deal. Corruption is not just money trail in that sense. The Prevention of Corruption Act defines corruption as an act by which you abuse your authority in order to give a windfall to anybody. It could be a windfall to you, it could be a windfall to anybody. In this case, it was absolutely clear that a huge windfall was going to come to Anil Ambani's company by way of 50% offset, 30,000 crores of offset, and Anil Ambani's company announced in a press conference that we are getting 30,000 crores by way of offset contracts in this deal. So, that's clear corruption. We made a very serious, detailed complaint, that is Mr. Arun Shori, Mr. Yashwant Sinha and I, to the CBI director. We went and met the CBI director, and the day he was to take a decision on this, the file was lying on his table. The night before that, there was a midnight coup by which the government sent several hundred police officers to take over his office, seal his office, seize all the papers from his office, and he was removed at midnight. That CBI director. Never happened in history before. Ultimately, of course, the Supreme Court said that it was illegal, but by the time they said that, he would have retired, so he was not really reinstated back. So, this is what was done to the CBI. And Supreme Court, of course, the less said the better, because we had gone to the Supreme Court seeking an investigation into this deal, and we pointed out so many things, that all the procedures have been gutted, the price has been increased, and we had gone with absolute documentary evidence, and more evidence came out during the hearing by way of Hindus' revelations, etc. And the Supreme Court took it as if we were questioning the contract itself. And they said, they used this non-existent CAG report, which CAG report hadn't come, which the government had just claimed in an unsigned note given to the Supreme Court in a sealed cover, which just completely guts the principles, the basic principles of natural justice, that you rely upon an unsigned note given to you in a sealed cover. You don't even share it with the other people. That note makes all kinds of false claims that a CAG report has come, it has been handed over to the PSC, it has been made public, all false. And on that basis, you give a judgment saying that there is nothing wrong with this contract because the CAG says there is nothing wrong with this contract. It's astounding what all happened. And of course, the great shame is that such a huge scandal, it's 100 times bigger scandal, defense scandal, than the Bofors scandal. Everything was shredded, every procedure, every institution, cover-up of monumental proportions, much bigger than even the Bofors cover-up. Of course, in Bofors, the other thing was, apart from the money trail, was the cover-up. Here, everything, national security sacrificed, Air Force requirement sacrificed, and yet the big media or the mainstream media doesn't even follow up the story. So I am very happy that Paranjoy and Ravi have done this great public service by putting together all these facts in one place. And I am sure, of course, there is an ongoing investigation in France, and I am sure that more information will come out in the time to come. Thank you very much.